Chapter 7. Apollo. No god is more Greek, or perhaps so Greek, as Apollo. He stands indeed as the incarnation and utterance of the Greek way of thinking. When, in the Ode to the Nativity, Milton would mark the eclipse and overthrow by Christianity of the Greek pantheon, he need only say, "Apollo from his shrine can no more divine, with hollow shriek the steep of Delphos leaving." Moreover, in Olympus itself, he seems to occupy a position second only to Zeus himself. At his coming, the Homeric hymn tells us, as he fares through the house of Zeus, the gods tremble, yea, and rise up all from their thrones, as he draws near with his shining, bended bow. Only Leto, his mother, remains seated. His first epiphany in the Iliad is as death-dealer. Phoebus Apollo came down from the height of Olympus, wroth in his heart, his bow and quiver on his shoulders, and his arrows clanged as the gods moved in his wrath. And he walked like unto the night. He is sudden, irresistible. For 9 days he let fly his arrows through the host, and men and mules and fleet dogs perished of the pestilence. Apollo in the Iliad is not prophet, not musician. He is the far-darter, the death-dealer, the most deadly of all the gods. But if he brings disease and death, he also brings healing. Apollo, like Artemis, is at least in part a northerner, and like Artemis, a healer. In a remarkable article, Professor Grace McCurdy has shown beyond the possibility of doubt whence Apollo came and what, in one of his aspects, he originally was. No title of Apollo is more frequent and more reverent than that of Paeon. Paeon is god of Paeonia, and Paeonia is the land of the Styptic Peony. In the Iliad, Zeus chides Ares for whining about his wound, but promises he shall be healed. Thus spake he, and bade Paeon heal, and Paeon, putting the pain-allaying herbs on Ares' wound, healed him, for Ares was immortal. Like as when fig juice by its quick action curdles the white milk which is liquid, but curdles quickly at the stirring, so Paeon healed fierce Ares. The peony was the first styptic to be discovered. It was brought to Greece through Persia from China and Japan, where it is still held in high honor as a magic herb of portentous might. The ancient herbalists teem with its praises. The red single species still grows on the Balkans. Of old it grew there in Apollo's ancient garden. Apollo and Artemis were both herbalists, and it may be that from their common function, the notion of their twinship arose. Apollo was worshipped by the Hyperboreans. And who are they? Not, I think, as the name used to be explained, the people beyond Boreas, the north wind, but following again Professor McCurdy, the people beyond Bora. Bora, like its Slavonic correlative, Gora, means mountain. Livy speaks of the region beyond Bora, the mountain, that is part of what is now Old Servia, the region bordering Pelagonia, whose chief city is now Monastir. There dwelt the Paeonians, a people of Thraco-Illyrian speech. The foot of Bora towards Pieria is sheltered from all northern blasts. There grew up the Hyperborean legend. There were the rose gardens of Midas, and there the ancient garden of Phoebus. Apollo was an herbalist, but he has close connection with trees as well as plants. It is still warmly discussed whether the actual name Apollo is derived from the root that gives us apple, or from Apollon, which means a kind of poplar tree. Setting aside this difficult question, we are on safe ground in asserting that Apollo had close relations to both apple and white poplar tree. But further, he was closely connected with the oak of his father Zeus, and in later days still more closely with the bay tree or laurel. Not only at Delphi, but as far north as Tempe in Thessaly, the laurel was sacred to Apollo. Aelian tells us that Apollo made himself a wreath of the laurel of Tempe, and taking in his right hand a branch of this same laurel, came to Delphi and took over the oracle. Here at Delphi, for the first time, the bay became prophetic. Apollo was not oracular in Homer, as we noted, but he took over the oracular shrine of the old earth goddess Themis. What the Daphnephoria originally was, we learn best not at Delphi, but at Thebes. There, each year and for the space of a year, a boy of distinguished family and himself fair of looks and strong was chosen, Pausanias tells us, to be the priest of Apollo. To him was given the title of Daphnephoros, laurel-bearer. A late writer, Photius, patriarch of Constantinople in the 9th century, has preserved for us details of the ceremony of laurel-carrying, which are of extraordinary interest. They wreathe, he says, a pole of olive wood with laurel and various flowers. On the top is fitted a bronze globe, from which they suspend smaller ones. Midway down the pole they place a smaller globe, binding it with purple fillets, but the end of the globe is decked with saffron. By the topmost globe they mean the sun, which they actually compare with Apollo. The globe beneath is the moon. The smaller globes hung on are the stars and constellations, and the fillets are the course of the year, for they make them 365 in number. The Daphnephoros himself holds on to the laurel. He has his hair hanging loose. He wears a golden wreath and is dressed out in a splendid robe to his feet, and he wears light shoes. There follow him a chorus of maidens holding out boughs before them to enforce the supplication of the hymns. This strange ritual implement, half orrery and half maypole, shows plainly as nothing else could how mythology is made and how the Godhead mounts from earth to heaven. The maypole first for vegetation, the moon and then the sun, the god as Eudaimon, and last the young priest, the god in human form. The ladder from earth to heaven is complete. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. Dionysus. The word Dionysus means not son of Zeus, but rather Zeus young man, that is, Zeus in his young form. Dionysus is not so much son of his father as son of his mother. His mother's name tells us his race. She is Semele, which is only the Thracian form of Zembla, in our Nova Zembla, New Earth. Semele is a Thracian, and Thracian belongs to the so-called Satem group of languages, which turn the guttural into a sibilant. Se for gay, the Greek for earth. Such languages are in this respect nearer akin to Russian, Persian, Sanskrit, than to Greek, Latin, and Teutonic. Semele is the Thracian earth mother, Dionysus is her son, and on vase paintings he is figured rising from the earth by her side. He was adopted comparatively late by the Hellenic religion, and is always a newcomer to Olympus. Homer barely recognizes his existence. The figure of Dionysus, like that of Hermes, had humble beginnings. On a beautiful culex now in Berlin and signed by the master Hieron, we have the primitive figure of the god. He is like Hermes, just a rude pillar or post, a tree rough-hewn and draped with an embroidered garment. He has a human head. The post is decorated with huge bunches of grapes, with sprays of ivy, and with great pieces of honeycomb. And round the god's neck is a necklace of dried figs, such as nowadays a Greek peasant will take with him as provision on a journey. He is clearly the god not of the vine alone, but of all natural products. Ivy was much used in his worship, and some have seen in the ivy the starting point of the god. About the tree god, in a great chorus, dance his worshippers, the Maenads. Dionysus, in the course of his development, undoubtedly became the vine god as well as the ivy god, but in essence he is something simpler and yet of great significance. He is the god of the ecstasy of the worshipper. He is the ecstasy projected. The rapture of the initiated lies essentially in this, as Euripides himself has said, that his soul is congregationalized. It is a group ecstasy. It is this and this only that we desire to emphasize in the figure of Dionysus. It is this that distinguishes him from the other Olympians. The other Olympians are, as we have repeatedly seen, projections of the desires and imaginations, even social conditions, of their worshippers. But it is only in the case of Dionysus that we catch the god at the moment of his making, at the moment when the group ecstasy of the worshipper projects him. Plato has preserved for us an Orphic text. Many are the wand-bearers, but few are the Bacchoi. Many perform the rite of Bacchus, few become, or as we should say, project, the god himself. Probably all pagan religions went through this stage, in which in ecstasy they projected their god. But the Olympians have long passed beyond it. Theirs is a sober service of prayer and praise and sacrifice. God and man are sundered, eternally distinct. It has been always noted, though till lately never really explained, that Dionysus alone of the Greek gods is always attended by a revel rout of Maenads and satyrs. Zeus, Athena, Hermes have no such attendants. Dionysus is surrounded by a theazos, that is, by a band of worshippers who project him. Out of the Bacchoi emerges Bacchus. But at this point it will rightly be asked, how could a company of Maenads, young women, project the figure of a young male god? They could not, and they did not. The satyrs project Dionysus, but the Maenads project the figure of the mother. The worship of Dionysus is always dual, of mother and son, though in later poetry the mother sometimes appears as nurse. Thus Sophocles in the Oedipus at Colonus. Footless, sacred, shadowy thicket, where a myriad berries grow, where no heat of the sun may enter, neither wind of the winter blow, where the reveller Dionysus with his nursing nymphs will go. The Bacchants are the mothers, and theirs is the magical power to make the whole world break into blossom. They tend the young of the wild things. And one a young fawn held, and one a wild wolf cub, and fed them with white milk, and smiled in love, young mothers with a mother's breast, and babes at home forgotten. On Mount Kithaeron, all creation stirs anew to life at the great ritual of the mothers. And all the mountain felt and worshipped with them, and the wild things knelt and ramped and gloried, and the wilderness was filled with moving voices and dim stress. Such are the moments when the gods are made. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. Zeus. We have left Zeus to the end, mainly because his figure is not only supreme, but in one way different from that of the other Olympians. He is more elemental. There is in him more of the thing worshipped, and less of the worshipper. His element is quite clearly and avowedly the sky, the upper air. When the gods divided all things into 3 lots, Homer tells us Poseidon drew the sea, Hades the murky darkness, and Zeus the wide heaven. In his monumental work, Zeus, the European sky god, Mr. A.B. Cook has shown that Zeus is the sky in its 2 aspects, the bright sky to which belong the ether, the sun and moon, and every shining constellation, the dark sky with the thunder, the storm cloud, and the rain. So in Homer, Zeus is before all things the loud thunderer, the cloud gatherer. He lighteneth, fashioning either a mighty rain unspeakable, or hail or snow, when the flakes sprinkle all the plowed lands. His messenger is Iris, the rainbow. The human Zeus of Homer scarcely commands admiration. He is shamelessly licentious. He bullies and even maltreats his wife. When his will is crossed, he is apt to behave like an uncontrolled thunderstorm. But there are beginnings of higher things, especially in the kindly aspect of Zeus as god of strangers, suppliants, and even beggars. It is, however, to the profoundly religious Aeschylus that we mainly owe the moralizing of the character of Zeus. Zeus was to him, through faith, the solution of all world problems. Quote, Zeus, power unknown, whom, since so to be called is his pleasure, I so address. When I ponder upon all things, I can conjecture naught but Zeus to fit the need, if the burden of vanity is in very truth to be cast from the soul. End quote. Quote, never, never shall mortal counsels outpass the harmony of Zeus, unquote. It happens very fortunately that Phidias, in his great chryselephantine statue of Zeus, embodied the ideals of the age of Aeschylus, and still more fortunately some of the impressions are recorded of the spectators of the statue. Quintilian said of the Olympian Zeus that its beauty seems to have added something to revealed religion. Dio Chrysostom wrote, Our Zeus is peaceful and altogether mild, as the guardian of Hellas when she is of one mind and not distraught with faction, an image gentle and august in perfect form, one who is the giver of life and breath and every good gift, the common Father and Savior and guardian of mankind, so far as it was possible for a mortal to conceive and embody a nature infinite and divine. The image brought to the troubled heart of the beholder something of its own large repose. For, quote, if there be any of mortals whatsoever that is heavy laden in spirit, having suffered sorely many sorrows and calamities in his life, nor yet winning for himself sweet sleep, even such an one, methinks, standing before the image of the god, would forget all things whatsoever in his mortal life were hard to be endured. So wondrously hast thou, Phidias, conceived and wrought it, and such grace and light shine upon it from thine art. Unquote. End of chapter 9. Conclusion. It is fitting that our argument should end with the great plastic image of Zeus, for this brings us to the very core or kernel of our debt to Greek mythology. This debt is twofold. We owe to Greek mythology first the heritage of a matchless imagery, an imagery which has haunted the minds of poets and artists down to the present day. Second, a thing, as we shall see, intimately connected with this imagery, the release of the human spirit, in part at least, from the baneful obsession of fear. First, as to the heritage of imagery, let us say at once that the debt is spiritual and not to be measured by definite borrowings. The modern poet or artist does not adopt a Greek myth as we may take over a bit of Roman law, or a definite discovery in mathematics, or some abstract conception in Greek philosophy. It would indeed be easy, and exceedingly tedious, to note and tabulate how often Shakespeare or Milton or Keats or Tennyson have suddenly illuminated their verse by a classical allusion. It is harder, but more profitable, to ask that these classical allusions, these mythological images and myths, have this magical power of illumination. The effect of Greek imagery on a poet's mind probably defies ultimate analysis, but this much may be said. An image is a thing widely different from an abstraction. It is not in any sense even a collection of qualities abstracted and recombined for purposes of religious edification. A nation less gifted loads the name of its god with epithets, and his idol with attributes. The Greek, because dowered with imagination, feels his god as a personality, with a live human history. This god is as much the outcome of his emotions as of his intellect, perhaps even more. The life of the Greek people is relived in him. It is because of this great actuality of the Greek gods that we have been at pains to show in detail how they came to be, how they express and project the life of the people who imagined them. But reality in Godhead, though it is much, though it lends to the divine figures a warmth and solidity and gladness that cheers and supports, is not enough. For a god to be really a god, he and his myth must touch us with some remote and magical appeal, something of light supernal and grace unspeakable, something that gives release from the ever-imminent actual. It is, I think, through this blend of the real and the unreal that the gods and myths of the Greeks remain perennially potent in literature, while the mythical monstrosities of Egypt, Assyria, and India are doomed to a sterile death. The second factor in our debt to Greek mythology is perhaps not greater, but simpler and much more easy to formulate. It is that from religion Greek mythology banished fear, fear which poisons and paralyzes man's life. Who is there, asks the Roman poet Lucretius, whose mind does not shrink into itself with fear of the gods? Praeterea cui non animus formidine divum contrahitur. One people, one only, the Greeks. To them religion was a thing of glad confidence, of high fellowship with the gods. Some rites of fear and repulsion they kept, for ritual is always conservative, but their mythology and theology, in their representations of the gods, was informed throughout by reason, lighted by beauty. It was a thing, as they themselves would say, of sophrosyne, of sane thinking and feeling. How was fear banished? By the making of beautiful images. The first gift of the Greek genius brought inevitably in its train the second. This connection is to us of supreme interest and of no small psychological importance. By some inspired instinct, the Greek seems to have anticipated in practice the latest discoveries in modern psychology, and especially in modern therapeutics. To banish fear, to banish any evil, we must exercise not the will, but the imagination. We must not so much determine to be brave, not make good resolutions, but think brave, cheering thoughts, think good things, beautiful things. Plato desired for the young citizens of his ideal republic that they should pasture their minds on beautiful thoughts. In a word, according to the new psychology of Coué, Baudouin, and a host of disciples, if will and imagination conflict, it is imagination that comes off victor. Thought, imagination, is the starting point of action. And above all, let that thought be active, live, positive, not negative. As Baudouin has well said, veni creator is in all ways a much surer method of exorcism than vade retro satanas. As a Greek would think it, it is better to domicile the Eumenides than to expel the Erinyes. The religious influence of the Olympian gods, mild, serene, beautiful, has been incalculable. Touched by their humanity, the Hebrew Jehovah lost much of his savagery, many of the traits he owes to the irresponsible thunderstorm. When in the Middle Ages Greek civilization, and with it the figures of the Greek gods, suffered eclipse, the banished ghosts of superstition came flocking back. Man is hag-ridden by fear, and fear engenders savagery. The Inquisition is the logical outcome of a terror-stricken conscience. His terrors can only be abated by a renaissance, a rebirth of the old Greek habit of thinking in calm, beautiful imagery. Each generation has its own terrors. We are now not panic-stricken by the pains of hell. We shiver instead before the perils of heredity, the hidden germ, the broken nerve, the insistent phobia. We still need to think Greek thoughts and feed our souls upon Greek imagery. Ruskin has told us why we need the Greeks. Quote, "There is no dread in their hearts, pensiveness, amazement, often deep grief and desolation, but terror never. Everlasting calm in the presence of all fate, and joy such as they might win, not indeed from perfect beauty, but from beauty at perfect rest." Unquote. End of section 6. End of mythology.